administration. We'll have to catch up with the others as they come in.
Yeah.
Okay. I've just had a reminder that there's an external scrutiny on, so that's all right. All right then. So welcome to the first meeting in 2021 of external scrutiny. Welcome to you all, to committee members and all those who follow our progress on the World Wide Web. Just to say who we've got today on our two items. I will say at the beginning that we're swapping round the items, which I can do. So under the chair's update, we're going to have an update from Joe Barker, the Welfare Rights Manager, Service Manager. And we're going to start with strengthening flood risk management preparedness. So from the flood risk team, we have Rachel Crompton, Marcus Lee, who's the Highway Service Manager, Infrastructure, John Davis, who's Head of Service Highways, and Laura McKeating, the Principal Flood Risk Officer, who's a new appointment that followed on from the Task and Finish Group recommendations. So that's that one. On the update, we've got Joe Barker, Welfare Rights Service Manager from Lancashire County Council, Andrea Smith, Public Health Specialist of Wider Determinants, Lancashire County Council, and Rachel Whippy and Jenny Duthie from the Citizens Advice Bureau are all due to attend. I've also welcomed County Councillor Erica Lewis. Erica, are you there?
Yes, Councillor Nash, I'm here. Thank you for allowing me to be present today.
Yeah, that's fine. Let me know if you want to speak, Erica, and I'll ask the committee.
Yep, on the flood item, please, Councillor Nash.
Okay, so I just put it to the committee. County Councillor Erica Lewis wishes to speak on the flood item.
Agreed.
Yeah, all agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine, Erica. Okay.
Thank you.
Right, let's go into the. It's a little.
Can't hear you, Chairman.
Can you not?
No.
Can everybody hear me now?
Yeah.
Yep.
You're there. Sorry, this boom fell. Let's go into the general information. As with ordinary meetings, presenters will be requested to present their information, then members will be invited to ask questions. If any members have a declaration of interest, type DOI, Delta Oscar India, in the instant messaging facility. And should you wish to ask a question, type RTS, Romeo Tango Sierra. If you need to leave, type exit, so we're aware that you have gone and it's not technical. Please don't use the instant messaging facility for private conversations. It's important that only the person called speaks, otherwise we'll get confusion. Please ensure you unmute your microphone before speaking and mute when finished. Speak clearly and clearly, and you're being watched and recorded throughout the webcast. All microphones will be muted at the start of the first presentation to reduce any background noise. But during the meeting, can I remind members to ensure the microphone is muted and the webcam is switched off. They only switch on the microphone and webcam when they've been asked to speak by the chair. Any members joining the meeting today using a mobile phone or landline can mute and unmute by pressing *6. Mobile phones can be used, but please ensure they're switched to silent for the meeting. So, thus said, we'll go to item 1. Sorry, I was muted then for some reason. Gary, do we have any apologies?
We have apologies from County Councillor Clark, thank you.
Okay. Right. So, disclosure of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests. Members are asked to consider any interests to disclose. Are there any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests? Fine, I'll take that as the...
Sorry, I was too slow. Councillor Nash, I don't know if I should disclose. It is on my forms, but I am, of course, one of the founders of the South Lancaster Flood Action Group.
Well, thank you for that, County Councillor Lewis. I don't think we need to take any more action on that. Okay. So, I just say that County Councillor Stuart Morris has replaced County Councillor Joan Burrows on a permanent basis on the committee, and has already indicated that he will be a little late today. So, item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of November 2020. Can we agree the minutes as a correct record? Yeah.
Chair,
Okay.
you have County Councillor Gillian Oliver and Carl Crum wishing to speak.
Yeah, okay. County Councillor Oliver, is this in respect to the minutes?
It is.
Yeah, you didn't attend that last meeting, but you're more than welcome to speak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's really because I wasn't at the last meeting that I do have these few questions about the recording of the minutes and what happened last time. So my first question is about page 5, the final item on universal credit, where a note is made that a written response from the Cabinet Member for Health and Wellbeing was outstanding since February 2020 on this matter of universal credit. I wondered whether that was a typo. That's a year we've been waiting for a response from the Cabinet Member, and I just wondered if that was a correct record. I have 2 other questions as well. Would you like me to carry on, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, please do, and then we'll take them all.
Thank you. My second point is about the bottom of page 3, where under the decarbonisation plans, there's a note to say it was suggested that Lancashire County Council should provide leadership on this matter and so on, but it doesn't say who suggested it. I really value some clarification on that. And then also similarly, back to page 5 and universal credit, it was felt the community hubs established during the pandemic were a good example of local authorities' health and the voluntary sector working together. Who felt that? Who said that? Thank you very much. Those are my points.
Thank you very much, Councillor Oliver. I can answer quite a few of those because I made the comment about the community following the presentation by the Citizens Advice Bureau, really to thank them for the work that they had done. The suggestion again from decarbonisation came from various places that I'd been on the rapporteur and that I put into my rapporteur report. In particular, I attended the Green Summit run by Lancaster City Council, where it was suggested, plus other councils in Fylde and Wyre. So that was the one on decarbonisation. And I would just say, I'm not sure about that date. I'll put it back to Gary for confirmation. But I would also say that I have been in touch with the Cabinet Member yesterday who is hoping to get to the meeting. I didn't sort of say that he would because he's got a meeting at 10 and thinks he can get away early and will be here to field any questions. Does that satisfy your queries?
Thank you. Is it possible to know whether that notation is correct, that we wrote to the Cabinet Member in February 2020 and we're still waiting for a reply?
Yes, I'm like you. I don't think it was February, but I will ask Gary to look into it, see if we can come back to you before the end of the meeting. Okay, thank you for that. Right. Any other comments on the minutes? So I take those as being a correct record of the meeting with the rider that we're looking at, that point the councillor have made. Sorry, who was speaking now?
Sure, I did put in a request to speak.
Where are you? You shot off the top. Sorry about that, Carl. Carry on.
Yeah, I'm just inquiring on the youth member for the youth parliament, whether we got a response back from him or not. Did we write to him, and have we got a response back?
I'm not aware of a response, or whether we wrote to them. We certainly asked them for their comments at the end, but I'm not sure. Again, I'll have to leave it to Gary to come back to me on that one and see if we can get you an answer by the end of the meeting. All right, Carl?
Yeah, Chair, I did ask at the meeting that I think he shot off early, did Mr. Stephen, and I just asked if we could ask him for his comments and what he thought about the meeting and our intentions on the decarbonisation.
Excuse me, Chair, you're on mute.
Yeah, we'll come back to you as soon as we can on that one, Councillor Crompton. Councillor Lewis, do you wish to speak now?
I assumed that officers would present on the report first. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, no, we're still doing the minutes, that's all.
Yes, no, I have no comments on the minutes.
Yeah, so we logged you. Okay. And I noticed Councillor Rose for item 5. Okay, I'll take the minutes as being a correct record. Thank you. We're now going on to strengthening flood risk management and preparedness, and we have an update and progress report following the actions of the and the follow-up actions from the task and finish group, and also the report on previous meetings that we've had. So I'm going to ask Rachel Crompton and her team. Before we do, I'd like to introduce, if she's here, Laura McKeating. Could you show yourself, Laura? She's the new member of the flood risk team.
Apologies, Chairman. Laura has been called away to another piece of work and she is very sorry to miss you. I'll make sure that I introduce her to you and to other councillors as opportunity arises.
Well, thank you for that, Rachel. So it's over to you now.
Thank you very much, Chairman. You've given me the opportunity to make a few comments in advance of discussion of the report on the agenda. Of course, my colleagues and I are here to help with any questions. I did want to reassure councillors and anybody else observing the meeting this morning that we've made considerable progress over the last 6 months with the wide range of topics that the committee has recommended to us. And the appendix provides only a summary and a position statement. You've asked me to highlight in particular some progress we've made with a couple of the items. Firstly, we have had a good response to our advert for a new post in the team, and Laura and I will be interviewing later this month, hopefully making an early appointment to a post that will help us particularly improve our work with data analysis of flood risk and our communications on flood risk management with technical partners in the outside world, also with our flood action groups, flooded residents and businesses, and the councillors who represent them. So we're looking forward to making improvements over the next few months in those areas of activity. We've also made, with Laura's particular involvement, a lot of progress with our key partners in the outside world, Blackpool Council and Blackburn with Darwen Council, on updating the local flood risk management strategy for the wider Lancashire geographical area. This is led by Blackpool, so although we had made suggestions to committee last year that we thought we might have a final document for consultation by the end of December. That's not happened. Blackpool has decided, and rightly so, that we need to incorporate the new national strategy for flood risk management that was completed by the Environment Agency only in September last year. So we've a little more work to do on what we include and how we phrase that for Lancashire. Technical partners have been consulted already, but Laura is about to release the latest version for consultation with our flood action groups and members of the public. So we've got a bit more progress to report on that particular item, Chairman. I think that's probably sufficient in terms of a brief introduction. At that point, I'll be quiet and see what questions arise for us. Thank you for that.
Right. Sorry, just getting back in. Yeah, we already have requests for questions. So everybody has received the Appendix A progress report with all the specific points in it. I would mention as well that we have been approached by certain flags to the committee, and I have passed on the points that they've made to Rachel, who can address them if she so wishes now or later on. So, County Councillor Lewis, would you like to take the floor?
Thank you, Councillor Nash. I guess I should say, is it more appropriate for members of the committee to speak before I do? Just aware that I'm visiting.
Well, yeah, we could. Councillor Rhodes, do you wish to speak at this time?
Yes, Chairman, I'm happy to speak. I was at a Fileborough Council planning meeting last week when I'm afraid to say that the County Council reputation was trashed, really, because we had an application for 300 and odd houses in Wharton, and it had been in hand at file for many, many weeks, and we had tried to get a response from County regarding the drainage on there, and we had not got a response, and it didn't go down terribly well. So I'm just wondering what is going to be put in place to actually respond to planning departments when they are consulting on drainage, because it is a very, very tricky thing when you're looking at planning applications to have confidence in the drainage systems being suggested by developers. And I just wonder if we can have some kind of response on that, because I have since that meeting been contacted by the chairman of the committee and several residents, which is why I'm raising it today. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that. Rachel, would you like to respond?
That's an extremely unfortunate situation, Councillor Rhodes. I'm very sorry that we've let files down in that respect. Unfortunately, the team can at times be overwhelmed by the numbers of requests for advice that we get from the planning authorities, and it's something that I'm working on with my manager Marcus Lee to try and move resources around within the team to be more resilient to those peaks in demand. We normally have an arrangement in place whereby the planning managers and the district councils will let me know if there's a particular concern or particular urgency or particular questions arising within the anxious communities about planning applications, and I can only imagine that engagement and interaction has failed over the Christmas period, and we will do our best to plug that gap with the file planners on a case basis, but come the start of the new financial year, Marcus Lee is determined that we have more resource available to respond to that sort of business. It's absolutely critical to flood risk management that our planners, developers and communities have confidence in the new things that are being built around Lancashire, that they won't make flood risk worse for existing communities. I can't do anything more than apologise for that problem in that particular location.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm glad to get that reassurance, and I'm sorry to have raised it, but it did take a lot of debate last week at Files Planning Committee. The other things that are raised are, confidence in these SUD schemes. I know to my sorrow that a SUD scheme on a new development in my area has not been successful, and I think we're getting more and more flooding because of the rainfall and the climate change, I'm sure. But are we getting better, shall I say, cooperation with United Utilities? Because during the year when I've had flooding in the town centre of Kirkham, I know that the drains have been cleared by the County Council, and I'm told that the problem is with United Utilities, and I would like a reassurance that they in future are going to do the job better than they are doing now. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Rachel, any comments on that?
Yes, Councillor Rhodes has very cleverly squeezed umpteen questions into that. Confidence in SUD schemes. The team can only respond to what's offered by the developer. And we do try very hard to navigate around some of the oversights, tricks, bits of missing information when we work with the planners to make sure that SUD schemes are reliable in theory. There are then a series of challenges to us in actually getting the SUD schemes to be built and operational and maintained as they were planned. And two particular steps along that line. First of all, Councillor Rhodes, we have worked on a regional basis with United Utilities, covering Cumbria, all the Lancashire authorities, Greater Manchester, Merseyside and Cheshire, to have a standard approach to evaluating the SUDS proposals that come in from the developers, with a view to United Utilities adopting as many elements of them as possible for future maintenance. That process, as happens with roads adoption, that process means that the design and the construction and the maintenance are all far more secure than they have been in the past, and we're looking forward to substantial improvements on that. Laura and I are thrilled that all the planning authorities in Lancashire, including Fylde, have seen this as a great opportunity and are working really constructively with us to get better information in from the developers and to make sure as many as possible of the new SUD schemes are designed and built and operated in a way that means that they can be maintained and looked after in perpetuity by our water companies. You've mentioned climate change and the increasing heavy rainfalls that we get. Yes, you're right. We've been advised by the government scientists that we're not getting more rainfall in a year. What we're getting is arriving in heavier chunks. And the floods that we had across the county in February and then in perhaps the western areas during August and September were absolutely devastating. We've also had isolated rainfalls elsewhere around the county, different times during the year. 2020 was a very, very hard year for some of our communities. The SUDS designs that we get from developers can at best only manage the water within the development site. There's still so much more to be done outside of our new developments. We've got to look at improving the way water is managed on open land, on built land, within our roads. And there's another project there, Councillor Rhodes, in retrofitting SUDS and managing surface water differently. And in terms of cooperation with United Utilities on their sewer network, I can see technically that they're very diligent, they're very responsible. I know that doesn't always come across on the ground, and there's probably more to be done in improving our communication. United Utilities are working, and all the water companies are working with a new requirement from Ofwat that they make some of their resource available to improving surface water flood management and surface water drainage. And we're seeing quite a lot of technical conversations behind scenes, looking at priorities, looking at joined up working. And I'm confident that over the next few years you will see lots of improvements where sewers connect to rain, connect to highway drains. And we don't want to confuse people on the ground by arguing between ourselves as to who's exactly responsible for a particular problem. What we should be doing is resolving those problems today when there's a puddle, when there's a flood, and making sure that we've got sustainable maintenance into the future so that doesn't happen again. And I would assure you, United Utilities officers are just as concerned as your officers are for improving that situation across Lancashire.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a very final point, and I'm not going to ask a question, I'm just going to make a point. Planning committees will not turn down applications on if the County Council on highways or drainage grounds are saying that the application is fine, and that's why I think planning committees are very, very concerned that we make sure in future that if we are approving applications, we're not going to cause problems for future residents. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that. I would bring the committee's attention to paragraph S for Sierra 9, which is the count, and it's a pity he couldn't make today. The council's lead member for flooding, County Councillor Stephen Clark, is the basis, using his research and advice as the basis of the approach for the Northwest Regional Flood and Coastal Committee as the key regional stakeholder. So really, he's the lead person in coordinating people like United Utilities, and he has investigated the situation with United Utilities and submitted a brief report to the chair of Northwest Regional Flood. So just to bring that to your attention, I think at this stage I'll bring in County Councillor Lewis because I've got a few coming on that haven't come up before. So would you like to now ask your question, Councillor Lewis?
Thank you, Councillor Nash. And thank you to the officers who have pulled together this response and respond to flooding. I think it's important to note the South Lancaster Flood Action Group is one of the groups that has provided comments to the chair, and of course South Lancaster has experienced further flooding since we last spoke about this at this committee. In fact, we flooded twice in August. So I think Councillor Ode's comments point towards the stress that the lead local flood authority is still under. I know we have worked to get them extra resources, and I know that extra officers are joining the team, but it does seem that there is still a resourcing problem. As Councillor Ode said, it's very difficult for a district planning committee to knock something back on a flood basis if the lead local flood authority is the person who's meant to have commented, and they either haven't commented negatively or haven't had a chance to comment. And there is a widespread belief in our community that new developments contribute to old flooding problems. And while we know that the National Planning Policy Framework says no more, no faster, most of us, I don't think, actually believe that. And the flood modelling that's done by developers is so technical that there's no opportunity for any of us to get into it and understand it under the engine. So we have to rely on the expertise of officers to make that assessment. And it's vital for our community that the lead local flood authority is properly resourced to do that.
Yes, will you help me, please? My name's Stuart. I'm calling from the office of David Morris, Member of Parliament for Morecambe and Lonsdale. And I'm trying to log into my computer this morning, and my brain has just gone totally phased. I can't seem to remember my username. I know the password.
You've actually called a county council meeting. I think you've dialed the wrong number.
Just 1 second. Hello?
Yeah, who's that?
It's County Councillor Stuart Morris, Ed.
Yeah, I thought you would be. Okay. Welcome, Stuart. You can talk later.
Thank you. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you, Councillor Nash. I think the other thing that my flag would particularly like me to note is there has been some very welcome increase in email communication. Rachel sends some really good update emails to tell people what's going on in terms of weather alerts and things like that. And I think everybody really does appreciate those. I know they might seem small to some people, but actually that reassurance that the county council knows the weather's coming, is acting, is working with the city council, is working with the environment agency, that kind of people are rolling to make sure that hotspots are checked and cleared, does bring comfort. And people often contact me to say, oh, you know, I saw an officer out, or I saw a truck out, and they really like it when they get their yellow weather warning and then they see a drain unclogger or a street sweeper go by, because it just makes them feel that people are paying attention. And I know we are, but it also offers that reassurance to people. I think the challenge, there's still a really outstanding challenge about the inclusion of flood action groups in the Making Space for Water groups. I know my flag is desperate to be able to engage in that forum, and it's that, and we understand that there's a need for a technical space that is just officers, but that ability to kind of come and say, these are the things that we are currently experiencing, these are the issues we are trying to follow up with all the partners in one space, so that, I know Rachel says we don't want to do this in public, but it does often happen that kind of everybody goes, oh, it's the responsibility of whoever's not in this meeting to fix your problem. And so that Making Space for Water is the place where all the technical experts gather. And so I think for many flags, they're really desperate to, you know, they understand that they can't sit through the whole meeting, but they're really desperate to be able to present information and get updates in that way. And I think that would help streamline a lot of communications for everybody. And I think another option for kind of strengthening that communication, I see that we've written a lot of letters, and I've been critical in other meetings about the letters rather than leadership, but I think actually sharing back with the flags those responses, so that they know that action was taken, they've seen the response. And I guess part of why we always set up this task and finish group was that we know that the management of water is fragmented, and Rachel flagged the need for kind of retrofit, because so many of our problems are because aged infrastructure is overwhelmed by modern rainfall patterns. We need a different approach for water to be managed, particularly in Lancashire, which is the area we're concerned with, but I suspect across the country. And so those letters need to be more than kind of one-off requests. They need to be about building campaigns. They need to be about actively working for policy change. And I think many of our flags would like to help with that work. And I guess that brings me back to my final points. There's an outstanding action about bringing everybody together. And I appreciate that officer resources have been stretched for COVID, and that resources are always stretched in the LLFA. But in many ways, now is a good time to bring people together. Lots of people are finding that virtual meetings are in fact more accessible than physical ones, because they don't require travel time and things like that. And if we're going to deliver the changes in water management that our community needs, then we need to be mobilising everybody, flags, parish councils, district councils, environmental groups, community groups, everybody who's interested, because this is such a big piece of work and, you know, such a difficult problem that we really will need to mobilise everybody. And on that note, I hope that there will be further updates to this committee on progress, because this is work in progress but not yet done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. I would mention that we received this morning a missive from the chairman of the Lancaster Flood Action Group, so we haven't had a chance to actually consult on it, but I will be actually putting that round to people later on. Rachel, do you want to come back on that one?
I'm very, very pleased to have Councillor Lewis's understanding and support in this topic. She hasn't said anything I disagree with, and everything she's asked for is here. We're striving for it all. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor John Shedwick.
Yes, thank you. I'm picking up on Councillor Ode's points. I'm glad to hear Rachel say that Marcus Lee is going to be more active on behalf of the Principal Flood Authority on consultations for planning applications. I just make a comment at the Wire Flood Forum in December. There was strong criticism, not for the first time. United Utilities didn't appear, but that's a thing that we'll be dealing with in Wire. I just make that comment. I also make the comment from United Utilities, I cannot remember whenever they objected to a planning application. I don't need a comment on that. I'll just let that rest. But it is essential in these major planning applications that we do hear from the Principal Flood Authority. So I very much hope that I understand Rachel's points there about staffing, etc. But I think we've got to keep stepping up to the plate on that. Could I just ask a question on M8? Could I have some idea how the terms of reference for making space for water meetings, they're under review. I just wondered how you were going on with working at those terms of reference.
Chairman, are you happy for me to respond?
Sorry, yes, I was just finding M8. Off you go, Rachel.
Thank you very much. Councillor Shedwick, first of all, can I correct a misunderstanding? United Utilities are not in a position to object to planning applications. They don't have a role in the development control process, and they aren't statutory consultees. One of the exercises that my team and I try to do in the 15 days available to us within the consultation period is to talk to UU, find out whether they have any comments they'd like us to make on their behalf. And we do try to collaborate with them where they've got problems, where they're concerned about the potential effects of a new development. We do try to take their advice and build it into our response to the planning authorities so that we can capture that advice, but you don't have a role on their own, unfortunately. That's one of the topics that Councillor Clark, as our lead councillor, is developing with the regional flood and coastal committee and trying to get a national platform for correcting that situation so the water companies can object statutorily. Then in regard to point 8 in our list of projects, the terms of reference for making space for water, the progress that we have made doesn't look like an awful lot on the record actually, but we have been talking to partners who are involved in making space for water, trying to understand what they want out of those technical meetings and where we can find ways of incorporating the flood action groups better. We'll be holding workshops on that point in the next couple of months, subject to resources and the right people being available. Of course, those workshops will still be online at the moment, so we've got to use different techniques and different software to make sure that we make the most of those opportunities. But yeah, we're trying to find a way of reconfiguring those technical meetings, those officer meetings that have to happen in order to progress business on the ground in our districts, to reconfigure those opportunities to share our knowledge with our community groups and flood action groups, to hear the advice of the people who are experiencing the problems we're trying to investigate, without losing progress, without losing efficiency. So that's what that particular activity is delivering for us at the moment, Councillor Shedwick.
Yeah, could I come back, Chairman? Yes, picking up on the position of United Utilities in respect of planning applications. They do respond, do they not, to planning applications? Do you see those responses?
They do respond where they can. Their advice doesn't have statutory weight in the balance of a planning decision. And my team and I will see those responses where we've already had an interaction with United Utilities. Sometimes the comments they make are very functional about discharge rates and adoption of sewers. If there's something more meaningful there, where we've got a more widespread problem, and we're hoping that United Utilities can advise on how to collaborate and use the development to improve existing circumstances, then yes, my team will normally see those comments before they're posted to the planning authority.
And just one final, if you indulge me there, Chairman. So if an elected member sees a response on a planning application from United Utilities, you would welcome maybe that elected member passing on that response to you if they felt it needed some further comment from yourselves?
Yes, we'll always respond to inquiries from county councillors.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, thank you both for that. I think I recall that with United Utilities, we did have a recommendation that they became a statutory referee as well. So I'll look back to see where that one's gone to. We've now got, I'll just in order, County Councillors Stansfield, Oliver and Oates. County Councillor Stansfield.
Vijay, mute.
Yeah, we'll come back to you when you're back. County Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just interested to hear what colleagues are saying about United Utilities. And I would love it to be minuted, actually, that because we had United Utilities attend this meeting in, I think, April 2018, Keith Ashcroft came from Region for United Utilities. And because there was a person in the room, that caused a success in a case that had been ongoing for 22 years. One of my residents on Blackpool Road in Preston got 6 months of work done to stop a faulty gully, offloading all of Preston's rainwater outside of their house for 22 years in heavy rain. And the background to that case was that nobody in highways really knew who to call about that level of work. And nothing was fruitful until we had United Utilities in the room. And I take on board what Councillor Lewis has said about very often the right people aren't in the room. And as Rachel Crompton alluded to, sometimes communications are a problem with United Utilities, and Councillor Shedwick has said this as well. My residents that I'm talking about, when they got flooded at a weekend, they couldn't call United Utilities and they couldn't call us, so they called Lancashire Constabulary. There's a constant pushing down the line of live flooding incidents to the most statutory organisation in the chain, and I just think we need to see them. I mean, this is a flagship piece of work for this committee, and what would be wrong in saying that we'd like to see Keith Ashcroft once a year and put it in his diary once a year, because this is such a valuable round table for these issues which are becoming more and more common. Could this committee ask for that, please, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Oliver. I'm sure we can. We'll note that, and we will see how we can get them on board. But I still also note the request that we made for them to become statutory consultees. So once that is in there, and I will liaise with Councillor Clark to lead on that one, if that's okay. Right, Councillor Stansfield, are you back? Yeah, I think we've we've lost. Hello, are you there?
Hello, yeah. It's mainly that I agree with Councillor Odes about when we're on planning in our local constituents, you very seldom see anything come back from highways, let alone United Utilities. But I've had been explained why United Utilities don't come back, but highways don't come back enough. I think they don't get involved enough. And one of the reasons I've got a problem now in Kirkhill, in Haslingden, with water running through the back gardens from off the main road, etc., in the hills, running through the back gardens of people's gardens and flooding out onto the road in front of their houses. Now, I have put this forward, and I believe John Davis is here today, and he may be able to help me with that. So, just like to see a little bit more quickness come about when there is a problem so serious as these people having waters running through their gardens and actually affecting their foundations to their houses. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know who wants to respond to that one, Rachel or John.
I wouldn't dream on standing on the toes of my head of service, but John, I have looked into this problem previously. Would you be comfortable with me answering Councillor Stansfield?
Yeah, that's fine, Rachel. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. This is a particular set of circumstances, Councillor Stansfield, that we have investigated to sufficient extent to know as best we can what the problems are. Your residents live at the bottom of a moor, and as we cannot find that the water in their garden is United Utilities responsibility. It's not clean water from a burst water main, and it's not foul water from a burst sewer. And we can't find that it's coming from a highway drainage fault either. What we believe is that it's arriving in their garden because the hillside is completely saturated with all the rain that we had last year, and that rain has found a new way through the ground and it's arriving in their back garden. We can't find that anybody is at fault for that. It is a natural process, and we're going to be advising your residents that is something they're going to have to manage themselves. Now, there is a possibility that up the hill, some current highway improvement works may help the circumstances, but they also may not, and we will not advise your residents to wait to find out. We're going to advise them to do what they can for themselves to manage the new springs that are arising in their garden. Now, that is natural processes. It's very, very distressing. I don't want to belittle that set of circumstances, but we can't help them find anybody who's at fault.
Right, can I just come back there, Chair? The thing is, if you look further along that road, there's been now for over 8-10 years coming off the hill, running in under the road, going into this guy's garden on the opposite side of the road, and he's now made a feature out of this in his back garden. But that's now running out, and there are the other ones at the other end of the road, what I'm complaining about. That's running through the road, through the other people's gardens opposite, and running into the council estate. Now, surely we have got some obligation somewhere to do something to help these people. And I know you're saying, well, it's not responsibility of us, it's not responsibility of them, but the roadworks at the top of the road, what is being done, it's been there for over 12 months now, I believe, and it's, when is that going to come to an end?
We're waiting for some further advice from our specialist design team. I've been advised it's going to be a few weeks yet before the advice is complete and the technical appraisals are finished.
So you, just coming in again, you'll be writing to these residents in Kirkhill?
Yes.
Okay, right, okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rhodes?
Thank you for letting me back, Chairman. I'm going to ask Rachel a question which she may not be too keen on answering, and it's about United Utilities and the fact that I do realise that they're not really allowed to stop anybody from tapping into our drainage systems. Therefore, should they really be a consultee? And if, given that they are a consultee, how much weight should planning committees give to them saying no objection? Because I know that in my authority, we all just groan every time we read no objection from United Utilities. And it seems to me that really, if they are not really allowed to say that they object, there's very little point in consulting with them. So I'm sorry to put that on you, Rachel, but I think it's quite an interesting point for planning committees. That's number one. And number two, I'd like to thank Gillian, and perhaps she could share Keith Ashcroft's contact things with us, so that we can all have access to that. But I do agree with everything that Gillian has said about having the right communication with United Utilities. Sorry, Rachel, I'm really sorry to drop that on you.
I don't feel that's an inappropriate question at all, Councillor Rhodes. I'm happy to discuss it with you. The drainage community in not just Lancashire but the whole of the North West finds it very challenging that our water companies are obliged to accept new connections into their pipe network without condition. We don't think that that's compatible with our current understanding of flood risk management, and we'd be very keen for the national legal situation to change in that regard. It's also incompatible, we feel, with having to accept all connections into the public sewer network, that United Utilities aren't statutory consultees in the planning process. It's a very disjointed approach in the statutory situation. United Utilities maintain a small team of development control officers. They scan the planning application lists, the weekly lists, and they choose to respond where they can. So it's their preference, their commitment to try and help manage water that they contribute to the planning process, but they're not statutory consultees at the moment, and they can't condition the developer's right to connect to public sewers, and that is not a joined up approach for us to have. So we will always try and work with UU and the planning authorities to try and make sense of that situation within the boundaries of the national planning policy framework. Obviously we don't want to be unreasonably conditioning development, but we do want to be reasonably conditioning the way that surface water drainage is managed. So yes, you and Councillor Oliver are expressing frustration with something that aligns completely with technical officers' views. Can I just please correct your understanding? Keith Ashcroft is the regional manager for the Environment Agency. I'll provide our senior democratic services officer with contact details for the right person at United Utilities these days, and try and help with that communication.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, thank you for that. Any more wish to speak at all? I don't have any more names on here. Right, just a couple of comments. There's an awful lot of work going on, as you can see from the response that we have to and all the various recommendations. There's a lot going to Cabinet in the not too distant future. We do have on the committee County Councillor Stephen Clark, who is the lead member for flooding, and I think we're going to actually poke him a bit to take more play more part in that, so that we're not constantly having to use a large stick, which is the committee, rather than actually come up with positive recommendations for the future. I'll also look when we get to our item 6 as to where we put the continuing scrutiny of this item in the programme, bearing in mind, and we'll talk about this in item 6, the county council elections in May. So Rachel, thank you and your team for coming along yet again and responding very brightly to us. I know you'll keep us updated, and we look forward to seeing you again at one of our meetings with even more going on than before.
You know, I can talk about my area of activity all day, Councillor Nash. Be careful what you ask for.
That's duly noted, Rachel. Thank you. And it's very good to see you all in good humour in the new year. And let's hope that we actually take that pile of work that was done last year, that I know County Councillor Lewis was heavily involved with, and just keep it moving. I always think that these things move more like a glacier than a river, but a glacier can't be turned off its course, and that's what I'd like to see with this. So thank you, Rachel. If you and your team wish to depart, then it's great to see you, and we'll go on to our next item. Okay. Right. The next item is the change round item 4, which is the Chair's update, which is slightly different this time. I would remind the committee of our 3 themes that we are now fixed on. It doesn't mean to say they're the only themes, but I would think for the rest of this this session that we stick with these, which is carbon reduction, universal credit and welfare, and the flood risk management. So we've added a presentation. Councillor Oliver asked earlier about the recommendation coming from last February. I think there's a slight misquote there in the wording, but I'm not going to mess about with that. There was a very, very long recommendation made February. We sent it to Cabinet in March, and it was there were quite a lot of things to do. Since when that team has been swamped with COVID, so they were due to come to see us or respond at the last meeting or this meeting, and I'm not making excuses for them, they can make their own, but we still don't have a response back to the request that we made to Cabinet. So I'm looking for a response back from those, and I'm hoping that Councillor Turner will be able to attend this meeting today to give us some more answers. I'll also respond to County Councillor Crumpton and say that yes, it was sent to this young man. Nobody's responded to us yet. We will push the children's side of life just to see if they can follow that up. So right, thank you. Councillor Lewis is now departing. Let's go on to a presentation by Joe Barker, who is our Welfare Rights Service Manager. Over to you, Joe.
Good morning. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Thank you for inviting me along. Gary, I don't know if the presentation can be brought up. Thank you. Here we go. So obviously I'm here to talk about universal credit again, but with a very much a focus on what's happened during 2020 and the pandemic. And obviously universal credit has played a big part in this. If we can go on to the second slide, please. So this data is actually taken from information provided by our local DWP partnership manager. They presented this. So it is based on job centre rather than districts, because in some districts people sign on at different job centres. Now what I always say with this type of data is try not to look at each individual number. We tend to look more at the trends and what it's showing. And I think, no doubt you know this anyway, but basically overall, all areas of Lancashire, there's been a significant impact by the pandemic in terms of number of claims that have been received. Technically, I think the biggest impact was probably around the end of March and into April. So this information, this slide is actually showing the total claims received, not that have been paid, just the number of claims received, and obviously represents a lot of people who have been struggling financially, either due to reducing the hours of work or furlough or losing the jobs entirely. If we could go to the next slide, please. Now, this information I've taken from the DWP statistical system, which anyone can access, register and access. Again, the information, the figures, you can't rely on 100% because of the way universal credit works, but we again look for trends and markers. Now, this information I've taken based on districts, which I think is more helpful, and it is about the number of households that are actually in receipt of universal credit. And you have to look at each month because universal credit is a monthly benefit. So some people might have to claim for 2 or 3 months before they actually receive payment, just because of the way, I won't go into it, but technically the way the claims work and how they look at income in each month. And again, with this, obviously individual districts, there is variance, but ultimately I would say that this represents thousands more households in Lancashire that have had a really sudden income shock. And basically most of the new claims are from people who previously had been working. They were working households and not in receipt of in-work benefits. So very much in significant financial hardship due to wage reductions and wage losses. And on the next slide, please. On this, what I've tried to do, just out of interest really, is to look at percentages. The numbers are one thing, but it's interesting to look at the overall impact. So I think, surprisingly, perhaps for some, the biggest overall percentage impact when you look at the districts is for Fylde, Ribble Valley and Wyre, whereas the lowest impact has been in what you would normally see as the more deprived areas, such as Burnley, Hyndburn and Lancaster, Preston and West Lancs, all of which have quite high numbers of populations in deprivation. What that basically says is, well, in the poorer areas, shall we say, or the ones where there's more reliance on benefits, there's already higher numbers of people on universal credit and receiving in-work benefits as well. So when there's an impact like the pandemic, because there's already a lot of people in that area reliant on universal credit anyway, they're already on the benefit. Whereas in these areas like Fylde and Ribble Valley and Wyre, you know, there are less people who are in receipt of in-work benefits and more people financially independent. So this is quite a significant shock for those households, basically. And I think regardless of where you live, whatever district you're in, where you suddenly see a huge income loss and you have no financial cushion to mitigate that loss, then it's a stressful and a terrible situation to be in. So this is showing probably the households that we have in each district that we would term our jam households. They're just about managing. And when they had a loss of income, a drop in wages or losing the wage, there's no savings to support them. You know, they've had to claim benefits and their income, even where the paid benefit, will be much lower. The other concern I have for these households is that because these are working households, a lot of these households are probably more likely to have credit agreements, mortgages, so they will be accumulating probably more debt whilst they are not able to work as they were doing before the pandemic hit. So there's going to be no doubt an increasing strain on debt services, debt advice services, and trying to support people who just have no option, no way of covering the liabilities that they have at the moment. If we can move to the next slide. So it's not often that you'll hear me use the words good news and universal credit in the same sentence, but yes, miracles happen, and here we have one. So for some people, it was a bit of good news in terms of for our core client group, so tending to be people with disabilities more than anything and people in low income households relying on in-work benefits. If you were already on universal credit, then the extra £20 per week, and I've noted that that extra £20 was also added onto tax credits. That helped people significantly, and the recovery of overpayments and loans and suspending those recoveries. So the only deductions from universal credit were for what we call advances. So when people first claim and they get an advance because they can't wait 5 weeks for payment, that had, again, it was an immediate increase to people's income, which was really helpful. Similarly, there's breathing space for people on disability benefits. So what happened straight away was the suspension of medical reassessments. So people on disability living allowance, personal independence payment, attendance allowance, if their award was due to come to an end last year, and they would normally have to submit review forms and have another medical assessment, that was suspended, awards were extended, so it was just some breathing space for them. So yes, for the core group of clients that we normally have to deal with and keep us very busy, they went a bit more quiet because they were left alone and less stress for them, I guess. On the next slide, much more familiar from me, bad news. So sharing some of the bad news was basically for any new claimants having to adapt to the universal credit income level compared to earning and what they were living on before is very, very difficult. Also, people who were making new claims for disability benefits, so whether it was COVID related or for other health reasons, long delays in getting those claims assessed and decisions made because of the suspension of the assessments, and currently they're undertaking some telephone assessments which can work well for some people but not very well for others, so it's a very mixed message. So, and some benefits like industrial injuries disablement benefits, still not really doing medical assessments for those unless it's people who are terminally ill. There's certain situations where you can get evidence that justifies an award, but other than that, for many people, they've just, and often obtaining disability benefits is the only way to increase someone's income when they become ill, had a significant change in circumstances, and they can't work. So we've had a lot more new claimants basically living on a very low income and really struggling and getting stressed during this time. Initially, we also had the suspension of appeal hearings. That was a good thing for us because before that happened, it was really concerning because the face-to-face hearings, which are held mainly in court buildings, magistrates' court buildings, were continuing, and obviously a lot of our customers have lots of underlying health problems, so we were having to start asking more and more for postponements. Very difficult, and thankfully the decision was then made to suspend the face-to-face, and we have since moved to telephone hearings, which again, with the support and help, we've had quite a lot of success with the appeal hearings in that respect. But for some people, they're not suitable, and those appeal hearings, I don't know when they'll get back to face-to-face. So in the meantime, you know, people are on hold with that. And the other bad news really was that because everything in the media was about claiming universal credit if you're struggling, there were some people who were on what we call legacy benefits, like employment and support allowance or tax credits, housing benefits, who thought that they should now claim universal credit and actually have found themselves financially worse off. We can't undo those claims at all. And the DWP were challenged on this because they weren't advising people that they could be worse off. They didn't check before they accepted claims. They don't give advice, basically, and that was the response to this, is they're not there to advise on benefits, strangely. So unfortunately, we do have people who now can't go back and have found themselves losing quite a bit of money each month. If we can go to the next slide, generally concerns ahead. So first and foremost is when all the mitigations are ending. So the furlough scheme, self-employed income support scheme, when evictions start to take place again, when we're back to full debt recovery, and essentially when DWP return to normal business, the impact of all of that is quite frightening, really, because at the moment a lot of the problems are with the new claims rather than people who've been on benefit and people with disabilities. So when all they start coming through, along with all the new numbers of claimants who are struggling, that's a real concern. We don't know yet whether the £20 per week will increase beyond the end of March. Will carry on beyond the end of March. So again, that could have a significant impact on people who've got used to that extra £20 a week and made use of it, depending on where we are with the pandemic and people's ability to get back to work or to shop more widely, and generally the cost of living. Employment recovery, there's so many issues at the moment. We don't know the situation. Clearly, those households that were working, who want to work, who need the wages, there's so many people applying for jobs at the moment, jobs that are available. It's a real pressure and a real stress for people. We just have to hope that the employment market recovers quickly and very well, and a lot of these people can get off universal credit and get back into decent paid employment. The benefit cap, not something you hear about a lot. Used to be something that affected households more down in the south of England because of the rent rates, but there is a benefit cap which for single people who, well, there's no children in the household, just single claims, that benefit cap is £13,400 a year. For everyone else, so couples or lone parents, families, it's £20,000. Now, when you first come out of work or your hours reduce and you have to claim universal credit and your earnings are below a threshold, which is £604 a month, the benefit cap, there's what we call a grace period. You have a 9-month grace period. So if you've been working and then find yourself on benefit, they won't apply the benefit cap for 9 months. Nationally, obviously those households who started to claim universal credit back in March were coming to the end of that 9 months. So I couldn't find local figures, but nationally there were 128,000 universal credits grace periods due to end in January, followed by 29,800 in February and 25,900 in March. Some of those will be Lancashire residents. And the benefit cap basically means when it's applied, it first of all affects the help that people are getting with the rent in the universal credit, but it can eat into more of that income. So families with high rents, families with 2-3 children and more may start to find it very, very difficult. And there'll be pressure on local authorities with their discretionary funds to see if they can support some of these families as well. So again, the sooner those households can get back to work and get out of this situation, the better. Our vulnerable people have gone very quiet during the pandemic, which really, really concerns us. Partly that's because help is limited for them. So DWP have not been visiting, ourselves, Citizens Advice, other frontline advice services haven't been doing face-to-face. Offices have been closed. All of these things have impacted on vulnerable people. I think a lot of the mitigation, so the food that was provided locally, the community hubs, that's really, really helped. But as that changes and as it reduces and as people start to resurface, I just don't know what we're going to see and how people will have been supporting themselves and managing. We already come across lots of people who drop out of the benefit system because they can't engage either digitally or by telephone, and I think we're going to find a lot more, which is a real concern. And then generally the emergency grants. So government have provided lots of different grants and funding mechanisms to support individual households who are struggling and also businesses. Again, when all of that at the end of March is due to come to an end, we just have to see what's left at that point, how households are coping, what situation we're in across the county, and hope that things will improve quite sharply. Otherwise, we're going to have a lot more people really struggling financially. So looking at, if we can move to the next slide, please, what we've been doing in welfare rights throughout this time. Essentially, we had already revamped our website. So many of the people claiming benefit are digitally capable, the new claimants. So our website was revamped in line with our service offer. So we put some really useful information on there about challenging decisions, for people over pension age, for carers. But during the pandemic, we were monitoring some of the issues that we saw coming up, both through the inquiries that we get from staff and also from what we were seeing on social media. So we've added COVID related information as well, because often when people look for information on the web, you find information, but you don't find answers necessarily. And what we've tried to do, using the intelligence we have and what we know people need to know about, is to give clear information, what's relevant, how you go about claiming, what to do if you've got a problem, so that people get the answers they need and can take action themselves before they come to us. But we also created a new mailbox so we can take inquiries digitally, by email basically, direct from members of the public. Where they need extra support. Our social media posts, again, by monitoring what issues were coming up, some of the problems people were experiencing, we put out, which we've not done before, relevant social media posts focusing very much on specific issues to try and ensure that people got the right information. One of the problems when you don't have all the face-to-face local advice going on and the experts, like Citizens Advice and ourselves, giving the same amount of support to people, is that they turn to other forms of, what the neighbour says, or using some of the social media sort of groups that there are and asking questions. And unfortunately, a lot of the information that gets put out isn't right, and it can have a huge impact. So we were constantly trying to mitigate that and put information out. We, for the first time, ventured into e-learning. So we created some benefits e-learning courses. And the first one we did was on PIP form filling, because what's happened during the pandemic, straight away the number of people making new claims for personal independence payment dropped. And no doubt in part because people couldn't just come into an office and speak to someone and get the advice and support. So people have just been waiting and waiting and waiting. So we started with PIP form filling, followed up by a general PIP course and an overview of benefits. And we're working on more of that, because ultimately we need staff, professionals and the public to become more aware and more confident at dealing with some of these issues to help. We can't all respond. We were overwhelmed before the pandemic, and no doubt that can happen again, and the same for Citizens Advice. So those who are out there working with the public and the public themselves, if we can educate them a bit and give them confidence, that's what this is about really, in particular for our own frontline staff. We've managed to carry on running our pensioner take-up campaigns. So we finished off a campaign with Rossendale Borough Council last year, and we started one with Hyndburn Council. So the targeted work with pensioners is really important, and we've continued that. But we are also about to start, hopefully, some targeted take up with schools. So we're looking at a school in Bacup at the moment because of the issue with free school meals. And the problems that people have now, again, with lockdown and children not in school and not getting those meals. We're looking at schools with where there's more or a higher percentage of pupils potentially eligible for free school meals, and do some targeted advice. And we'll review the outcome of that before we consider moving on to other schools. But again, we are trying to use the resources we have to look at key situations and see what we can do to help, and whether it's worthwhile. We created a staff duty line. Initially, it was just 2 afternoons a week or 2 half days a week, but it's now over 5 days, morning and afternoon. So we needed to ensure, when we went through our service challenge, one of the issues that came out was people not able to get advice quickly and getting the wrong advice when they were, or varying advice when they contact different DWP offices. So in creating the duty line just for LCC staff, it meant they can have simple inquiries dealt with very quickly when they need it, but more complicated inquiries, they will be referred in to us. But what we also did during COVID is we started to get questions from staff who in their own households, their own personal situation, they were struggling, and we encouraged them to contact us as well in confidence to get the advice and help that they needed. I think we forget that our own staff also have lots going on and lots of issues. The next phase of our work is to really do a revamp of the information we have on the intranet. So the information on our website is very much targeted at the general public, but we have very specific issues with services, and I think we need to do a lot of work to help those services and to explain what we can do, and to really encourage all of our frontline staff to pick up on financial issues, financial problems that people are having, and be confident to have a conversation and to get the right help and to take action straight away. So more and more we find very, very disabled or vulnerable people who are in our statutory services falling out of the benefits system, and we need to act to try and reduce that happening, and to also, when we do come across it, to make sure that DWP actually enforce their safeguarding principles and get these benefits back in place, without us having to do all new claims and missing out on a lot of income, both to the individual and to the authority who's supporting these people in the meantime. So that duty line's been quite helpful, I think, for colleagues, and we will keep that running for as long as possible. And we'll use the information from that to help with our content for the intranet. We want the intranet to become the place that our own staff go to first, and hopefully get a lot of useful information. And that helps with the sort of dealing with financial issues for all of our staff and customers alike. And then what we have really noticed is the increase in our caseload for very vulnerable residents. So we get more and more referrals now from our statutory, our social care staff, and some of those cases, even when it's a simple benefit issue, the complications, the complex issues that the individuals have trying to work with them, and especially during COVID, trying to get claims sorted out and benefits up and running, has been really, really challenging, and it takes much longer, and people need a lot more support than they did before. Equally, our pensioner caseload, my 2 team members who deal specifically with pensioners during the pandemic have spent quite a bit of time just checking in with some of our older people as well. We've found contact with the hubs where we've needed it to be really, really helpful, and they've gone out to some of our customers and really helped them with other practical issues, not the benefit work, but that's made such a difference to some of our residents. And I know from the feedback we've had from customers, they've really found that contact valuable. So we've encouraged that, and we will keep that up as well. So yeah, it's basically just keeping we're doing more and more work with our frontline colleagues in the County Council, and we need to carry on doing that. They are our priority now, and they are dealing with some very difficult situations, not just caused by universal credit, but often it's a complicating factor. And on the next slide, please, which is my last slide really. Again, I usually mention the challenges for LCC, so definitely making universal credit claims for the most vulnerable is a huge challenge. We've got people who the Help to Claim service have managed to help some, but some of our customers who can't access that because of their complex needs get referred into the DWP visiting service to assist with the digital claims. But they haven't been visiting people, and even where the situation's been really, really dire and really concerning, we've raised this as a policy issue with DWP because we need a way that people can make a claim no matter what the situation is, and in some cases it's been a real issue. So that means that where we've got people in residential care homes or hospital and our social work teams are going in, you know, LTC is obviously absorbing some of the cost of supporting those people until we can get benefits sorted out. The other big issue, something I've mentioned before, but on universal credit, our disabled customers, there is no, on legacy benefits, there's an extra amount called a severe disability premium, which really boosts the income for the most severely disabled customers. That doesn't exist in universal credit. And what's been happening is there's been what we call a compensation payment that's been paid separately to the universal credit. And that was to compensate people who had to move to universal credit but lost the severe disability premium in doing so. Because it was paid separately, it's carried on at a static amount. However, from the 27th of January, that payment will actually be incorporated into the normal monthly universal credit figure. And what that means is that as people's situations change, it will keep eroding that compensation payment, if you will. So in April, when everybody's rents go up, they won't notice an increase in the universal credit because it will reduce the severe disability premium amount, if you will. Now, the issue for us is that obviously a lot of the income we get, the contributions that people make towards the cost of their care packages and direct payment budgets, is because of this extra income they get. And as that reduces and stops, that's going to speed up the reduction in income that LCC gets towards meeting those costs of care packages and budgets. So monitoring that really and the impact on that, I think, is quite important. But this is the first change that is really going to have a significant impact on the financial assessment team, and just keeping up with the assessments for people who report all these changes and see their income essentially not changing but see their outgoings increasing. That will impact on our financial assessments. Overall, I don't think anyone needs me to explain the impact of households in poverty, the health-related impact that has, and the impact on our services. But we have seen an increase in individuals and households struggling, and we're going to see more of that. And universal credit in particular, we've had our first case in Lancashire with a shared lives carer. So some shared lives carers are reliant on benefit. With universal credit, they because they are treated as self-employed, it means that they are treated like any self-employed person, and after 12 months there's what we call a minimum income floor. So for shared lives carers, essentially it means, well, you're treated as working full-time on the minimum wage, and so many of them who've been used to previously getting income support, a housing benefit, will find that actually there won't be any universal credit paid to them because of the minimum income floor, and that in turn means Lancashire County Council's financial support for shared lives carers who are reliant on benefits will be more costly. People may need more support, but it may also put off people from applying to be carers in these situations. We've already found with our SGO cases, so our children, kinship carers as you'd call them, we've had to do an awful lot of support to those carers because universal credit, every potential problem that could happen has happened. So now seeing it with shared lives carers, we're expecting problems to slowly increase with foster carers and stay and put carers as well. All of these cases are where we have financial obligations and agreements, and obviously the income that people get impacts on LCC's funding. So we just have to monitor this and keep reporting on it really, but we're starting to see some of the concerns that we've raised before coming into fruition really. And the biggest concern is no doubt for the individuals affected by that loss of income. And that is the end of my presentation, thank you. So happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Joanne. We have a question from County Councillor Gillian Oliver.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to put on record, please, on behalf of all of us, our great respect for Joanne Barker and her team. We know, because you've helped us in the past with similar presentations, how valuable this work is and how brilliant you are at it and how you take it on board personally. And this is the real work of councils. We're very impressed and we want to offer you all support. So with that in mind, two things. This issue about people who are vulnerable being unable to claim universal credit because they are incapacitated, in hospital or in some other way unable. How could we help with that? What could we do in this committee? What could this council do to support that for people, potential claimants in Lancashire? And the second question I have is about universal credit and sick pay. So there's quite a lot of conversation at the moment that you can only get sick pay if you're already a claimant for universal credit. And if you need to self-isolate, you're not going to because sick pay is too low. Are you getting any sense? Could you give us like a couple of sentences about that stream of work in terms of sick pay, or is it not something that you deal with, Joanne? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the comments. In terms of vulnerable people, we've highlighted this. I think one of the issues in the request that you made to our cabinet member was about how the committee can support any issues arising, and this is one of several. And certainly my own comment to that is that actually what we need to do as a service is to highlight these issues to you in a sensible, pragmatic way, giving examples, and ask for your support, no doubt, to raise these issues, I guess not just with DWP, but ministers in general, because it does, in particular, where it's impacting on residents, but where it's also impacting on LCC funding. So we are, as a service, now trying to capture more and more information and work with other services that are affected to get the relevant information, and we can present that information to you and then ask for support. But I think what we need to do is show you those cases and walk you through so that you understand it, and no doubt you may have your own ideas then about what else you would like to do to help people. In terms of sick pay, there is a lot, and has been throughout this period, a lot of confusion about whether people can get statutory sick pay or employment and support allowance and universal credit. Essentially, anyone, whether on sick pay or not, can claim universal credit because it basically just looks at a household income. But currently the position, as far as I'm aware, I think I read something about this yesterday, is that if people have to self-isolate, they can still claim sick pay from day one, but they may need to claim both. That there are situations where people need advice to look at their income and to consider whether they should be claiming or can claim statutory sick pay, employment and support allowance, or universal credit. We have information on the website, so on the COVID pages, it links to financial information, and we have been keeping that up to date. As soon as something changes, we update it. So you may find answers on there, but certainly the current position with lockdown has been that, as before, people who are either extremely vulnerable and can't work or self-isolating should still be able to claim sick pay. But it's not one or the other. You may get both. You may get sick pay topped up by universal credits because sick pay itself doesn't offer enough financial support. It just depends on the household situation. So yeah, we can look at that. There's some, for those that are struggling to get advice but are digitally capable, on our web pages, we have a link to a very good online benefit calculator. Now, for those, we always say they don't give advice, but where someone's situation is very clear and it's, here's my income, can I get help? They do actually, for straightforward cases, provide a lot of useful information. So if someone's currently struggling financially and is capable of going on the online benefit calculator, they may get the answers they need from that. But if not, they can certainly email us, they can ring Citizens Advice, we will try to advise them. But there is no longer simple benefits advice, unfortunately. With universal credit, although the idea is it simplifies the system, it's made it far more complicated. You have to understand legacy benefits, everything that's happened during the pandemic, the furlough, the self-employed income support. There's been lots of issues for self-employed people who become sick. Do we claim sick pay? Do we claim the self-employed income support? What do we do? And yeah, people need individual advice basically, but that is something we can help with. So if people are struggling, then do get in touch with us. Thank you.
Any more from that, Gillian?
Thank you, Chair. Very grateful for that.
Thank you. I'd now like to welcome County Councillor Sean Turner, who, as the Cabinet Member for Health and Wellbeing. Sean, welcome. Would you like to kick off?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think I'd firstly like to echo exactly what Gillian said, in that Joe's team have done a sterling job. They do a sterling job anyway, but particularly through these very trying times. It's a small team. Every time I've contacted them, it's been a positive experience, and only very recently, and I hope Joe got this, I forwarded on some, I was contacted asking to thank the team for the extensive and brilliant work they did in terms of a PIP appeal. The words were in that email that they went over and above the call of duty, so I thank Joe and the team for that. Going back to the February meeting where some requests were made of Cabinet, the sort of pandemic came along and not necessarily drove a horse and cart through all of that, because a lot of that remains relevant. But it has meant that the gloves have been off as we've fought the pandemic. So it's been a really, really trying time. And I suppose the worrying thing is the red flags that are there in the distance that we're approaching, and a lot of the problems are sort of being held in abeyance when you talk about debt recovery, evictions, those sort of things that have to land and have kept being put back as we've gone on through this. It's going to be a really trying time going forward, and I suppose what I would like to do is commit to sitting down with Joe and any relevant officers, looking at the impacts, also understanding how the pandemic has impacted on health inequalities on the front line, and how we might approach this going forward. Certainly a commitment from me to find resource to help that all happen and to help support people going forward, because it is, like I say, it's problems that have been stored up, and they're all sort of going to be unleashed at some point. I'm not sure we can just turn the economy straight back on like a light, Some of it will be able to get on, but other bits will take some recovery in terms of all the debt that individual businesses have stored up as well over this period where they've not been able to have an income. So I'd like to do that, Joe, if we can, and then we can from there take some things forward that hopefully can help you in your quest going forward in the team.
Thank you. Yes, that's fine.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Sean. What we found is that we did make these recommendations for Cabinet and were sent in March last year. Some of them have been overtaken by events a little. For example, Cabinet give consideration to identifying innovative place-based partnership working between Citizen Advice District Council and local NHS. Well, the hubs that Joanne has mentioned, and also our friends from the Citizen Advice Bureau, Jenny has just posted, has happened regardless. But I would recommend that you look at this with a view to doing it more formally, and the NHS doesn't seem to be involved at all in that. We are stuck that we can't really make, and we had a very good presentation on our last meeting from the Citizens Advice Bureau from Rachel Whippy and Jenny Duthie with various points that we could take in as well. I'm particularly concerned that we were looking from a previous presentation by Joanne, I think it was, of the work that you were doing then, and now it must be so much greater. Have we got the resources? Can we? Is Jenny's team? Is Joanne's team being improved, increased? Is there more money for it? Have we approached, or can we approach the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions to ask for more resources so that the disadvantaged, which is the main people we're looking at, are supported? I'm quite interested, for example, in my area, and I know it's the same up in yours, Sean. I've got 30 odd hotels and restaurants in my area that really haven't done any business in the whole year, which is a very strange state of affairs, and it's not the sort of area, for example, that has a lot of vulnerable people. So we've had to do a lot of work coordinated there to help these businesses and to help the people that are suffering from it. I'm appalled by the DWP clamping on, once you've got that, we can't change it, which is a bad state of affairs. And we've invited them so many times to come to this meeting that you know, they just won't turn up for us to ask these sort of questions. So I would commend that if you can, as soon as possible, have a quick look at the recommendations. There's some 6 of them. One of them's already happened for the Citizens Advice Bureau, for example, looking at how the Welfare Rights Service might be improved and expanded because of the current crisis, and the nature in the future of the great unknown. I think you mentioned that. Nobody has a crystal ball. So where do we go from there? But that's probably too much to throw to you in one go, Sean. So
no, Chair, no, I've got the recommendations there back into February. But like I say, we need to now have a really good look at this going forward, as you know, God willing, we come out of this this pandemic situation, which we will. It's just that we're not doing it just right now. But there are a lot of problems shored up, as I've said. I do welcome the knowledge base that's been created on the website. I think that's an important thing, because a lot of people can and are willing and happy to look at that if it's there, and what their rights are and what they can do. So that's great, but there's always going to be those that need that support, and it's really important that we pick them up. But in terms of resource going forward, like I say, I certainly commit to plugging any gaps that may be needed coming forward. I can make a very strong case on that, and that's why I'd like to sit down with Joe and maybe understand the frontline services and how they're going to be impacted, and we can come back with some sort of coordinated response. But once I've got a bit of detail around that, then happy to contact the DWP, contact the Secretary of State, and lay our case out and why we feel we need extra help.
Yeah, thank you for that. I've got a few questions coming up. Jenny, can I take you last? I want to take a couple of councillors in, and then I'll come back to you because there's a few questions that I know you have. So, County Councillor Carl Crompton, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions to Joanne. Several times during your presentation, you mentioned the extra cost to the county. If there is an extra cost, have you any idea how much that cost is going to be to the county council? And if you have, how do we recoup that money? Where do we get it from? Do we get it from the government, or do we get it from the individuals? So that's my two questions.
Thank you. So the extra costs vary. I don't have overall figures because I need information from the services affected, but examples would be can range to several £100s a week. So in theory, we have currently people in residential care who have no benefit income coming in, so the county council is paying the full cost of care, where normally you would have a contribution from the person's benefits. So as a minimum, that can be over £100 a week on just one person, and we're footing the cost for that with our financial agreements for special guardianship order cases, shared lives, carers, the licence agreements, and potentially foster carers in future. We need to do a lot of work to look at, to try and identify just how many of those carers are reliant on benefits and the average costs. So we've been doing a lot of work over the last couple of years with special guardianship order cases, and there was a change to the means test, so to the amount of money that Lancashire County Council pays to those carers. And instead of the county council, so local taxpayers, paying the full amount, they are now expected to claim benefits, so they get part of the finance from benefits and then the rest made up from Lancashire County Council and local taxpayers, if you will. Now, those amounts can range from several £100s a month that people should get, and we find that when the problems we've had have meant that for several months Lancashire County Council has had to pay the full contribution to people because the benefit hasn't been sorted out. So we now work with every new case and some ongoing cases where special guardianship orders are recurring, and that, I think the target for Children's Services was to make £1 million reduction in what we pay, and that money will come from benefits. I think we're achieving that, but that's most definitely because of the work that my team are putting into those cases. If we didn't do that, again, it would be significant. So we need to do a lot of work on this, and this is what I want to do and report into yourselves with the help of other services, identifying the numbers. I really feel a big issue is not just the general public, but also a lot of staff don't understand that essentially when we get benefit income, that is essentially central government funding. When we don't get that, so some people choose not to claim the benefits they're entitled to because they say, well, then I'll have to contribute money to the county council for my care package, for example. They don't understand that actually the funding for them would be the same, but actually for taxpayers and for services, it makes a huge difference. And I think we've got staff the same who don't understand that, well, if we can get the benefits, which is central government funding, then there's less pressure on local taxpayers. Everyone's council tax keeps going up every year, and people on benefits struggle more and more, working age people, to pay the contributions. If there was a better understanding of all of this, I would hope that more people would get the benefits they're entitled to and would question it when they don't. So we still have a long way to go to get staff to pick up on benefit issues and to talk to us about it for their customers and to get our help. But where we know there are issues, we'll do some work on that. And I think the starting point is just again, highlight some of those individual cases, show you the figures that are involved for the individuals, and then try and get information from services as to potentially how many people ultimately it will affect. And I think, you know, the resources that are needed to make up for the extra cost to Lancashire County Council would have to come from central government. At the very least, it's highlighting to them that the DWP policy issues, mainly around universal credit, are at odds with social care policies in supporting our carers and our disabled residents. So I think that's all I can say on that. I'm sorry I can't say more, be more clear.
Thank you. Is that all right for you, Carl?
Yeah, so really we don't know who will get the money back off. I know you mentioned central government. Will we get it back off central government? Or is it one of them that you have to put a case forward and hope that the wind's in the right direction?
I would say we have to put the case forward. I think what is lacking is, I know local authorities generally have raised issues about the extra costs for different things, and this is the same. This is about saying your universal credit policy, fine, but what this now means for the county council's financial policies is this. Where's that money going to come from? And it's first of all highlighting that it is an issue. I'm not sure that central government have acknowledged or understood the extra financial burden because of the welfare policies on our local residents. So that has to be the starting point, I would imagine.
All right, thank you for that. Could I bring in Andrea Smith at this stage? You've asked to speak, Andrea. Can you introduce yourself as well, please?
I can, yes. Thank you very much, Councillor. Andrea Smith, Lancashire County Council, Public Health Specialist. Welfare rights comes under my portfolio of work, and I work with Jo Barker, supporting her and her team. So that's my background. I work for Claire Platt. I'd just like to thank the councillors for their support at both the last presentation that Jo did and also for this one. So thank you very much for this. I think Jo has highlighted very eloquently some potential areas of impact on the council. She did that previously, and those have been compounded as well by the impact of the pandemic. Welfare Rights is a very able and competent team. I think we're very lucky as a county council to have the knowledge that they have. Not all councils have that to call upon, but I do think we're at a stage now where that knowledge and experience would be enhanced with some work around business intelligence and data gathering, and also working a lot more closely with other LCC services, something that we have been trying to do, but again, that's been hampered a little bit by the pandemic and the impact of that on our services. It would be useful, as Councillor Turner said, to do some of that work, to project manage some of the more significant work streams that we find out through the business intelligence and data gathering, to achieve the best outcome for some of our Lancashire citizens and for the County Council in drawing down some of those benefit funds from central government. We can articulate the ask better. if we do some of that work. The issue is that at the moment within the team we don't have the capacity to do that, and I'm not sure as whether we do in our business intelligence either, as we're supporting a lot of the COVID responses. So that's something to think about. I think it would then that would give us the tools to be able to articulate for you what the impact is on the services that Joe has mentioned around people in residential care, for instance, and the cost there is to LCC, and it would help in the work that Councillor Turner wants to do in contacting the DWP and the Secretary of State. It would put some meat on the bones of that ask. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Andrea. Can I go now to County Councillor Oliver?
Thank you, Chair. And sorry to come in just once again, but it takes me right back to the first point I made about the minute, which said that indeed a report had gone from this committee to the Cabinet member in February of last year. Then that minute, therefore, is shown to be correct. Then goes on to conclude that we should wait for a response before formulating any further recommendations. However, a whole year has gone by. I accept Councillor Turner's assessment of the year that's gone by. However, this is materially relevant to the year that's gone by. I would suggest, propose that we don't waste any more time waiting for a reply. However, we can already now begin to formulate further recommendations just on the basis of this update that we have received. I was part of the original piece of work on this as the rapporteur on the Universal Credit work stream, and I would be very happy to support, shepherd, be part of this extra piece of work identified by Andrea Smith about business intelligence and data gathering. I think we need to move fast, and I would ask please that that minute that we should wait for a reply from the Cabinet member could perhaps be softened, that we could actually now stride ahead and make further recommendations in the hope that we might get a response to our one from February last year.
Thank you. So let me get this quite clear, Gillian. You're offering to meet together with Sean's team and Andrea's team to formulate the way forward. Is that correct?
I am happy to lead on further recommendations, and I would ask that we don't have to wait any longer before we move ahead on that, given the times we're in. Yes, thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you for that. Sean, Andrea, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just let me get my camera on. Yeah, no, as happy to do that. However, I would say, sorry, I'm being attacked by my my new puppy here. What I would say is that I think we get all our ducks in line, and I wouldn't want to go scattergun and start making requests without having the full sort of picture in front of us and where we currently are, and understanding that impact on frontline services. I'm really sorry, I'm trying to stop the puppy biting my wires. Go away. So what I would say is, as Andrea mentioned there, capacity has been an issue this year. There's, you know, really a big issue, and has inhibited the ability to do some of the recommendations. There's no question of that. If we're going to do this right, I think we do it properly. Let's weigh up the situation as quickly as we possibly can, and let's understand that still capacity issues are a problem. But I think anything Andrew talks about putting the meat on the bones. I think that meat's got to be good meat, and I think it would strengthen the case in any ask that we have going forward. And I'm happy to work with Councillor Oliver, but I think we should just, like I'm not saying wait forever. I'm just saying that we need to get this right.
Hello, Councillor, if I could just respond. Yeah, just need to do some perhaps thrashing out of what needs to happen, because I think if we are going to make an ask of government and the DWP, then it needs to be a comprehensive ask. And thank you. I welcome both Sean Turner and Gillian Oliver's support on that, as I'm sure Joe and the team will do as well. So happy to meet and work that out in the first instance, and then perhaps we can set some things in train, or at least identify where we may need additional capacity to support that work.
Right, thank you for that. Councillor Oliver, is that good with you?
Chair. Thank you, Chair, very much, and thank you, everyone. I'd welcome a meeting as soon as possible. I'm available immediately. Thank you.
Yeah, fine. We'll formulate a recommendation a little bit later, but I do have, with apologies, Jenny Duthie, who requested to speak.
Thank you. Yes. Basically, really, I just wanted to answer, which I have in the messages, Councillor Oliver's query about what she does with her constituent who's having multiple problems around benefits, that we've got our help to claim service. But I would also like to thank Joe for the presentation, and it very much reflects what we're experiencing in our local offices throughout Lancashire, the impact of COVID, and I think we're very much, as people have said, stepping into the unknown now, and I'm very concerned about resources. I'm particularly concerned about what Joe's highlighted about the massive increase in the number of households on universal credit in what were thought of as the affluent boroughs of Fylde, Ribble Valley and Wyre. When the Help to Claim service was originally set up in 2019, we were allocated resources on the predicted number of claimants, and so obviously Fire, Wyre and Ribble Valley were given limited resources because it wasn't anticipated that there would be a large number of claimants in those areas. Well, that's now been turned on its head. So I see those offices being particularly stretched going forward. I think one of the ways forward for us is if Joe's in agreement that we work collaboratively with Welfare Rights to overcome these problems that we're going to experience. And I will be happy to give any evidence that you may need when approaching the DWP on policy change. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So I think just to draw it to a conclusion, and Gary and I will put these together probably a little more formally. We're looking at a recommendation that County Councillor Gillian Oliver carries on her rapporteur with the Health and Wellbeing team with a view to answering the questions posed by previous recommendations with a view to reporting back to the next meeting. We'll put that into a better form of words and circulate it to everybody. But are any further comments on that? Okay, so can I take that as being the way forward? We have yet, and we're going to do this in the next item, which is the program going forward, to identify when we can look at all this together with our three themes. So I'd like to thank all the people who have joined us for this part of the meeting, particularly our friends from the Assistant Advice Bureau. Thank you for the presentation from Joanne, and thank you to County Councillors Sean Turner and Andrea Smith for attending the meeting and giving us the update report.
Thank you very much.
That's a pleasure. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone.
Fine. Okay, so thanks for that, Jen. Yep. Right. So without further ado, we go. Further ado. That wasn't, no pun intended. We're going forward into the overview and scrutiny work programme. Now the big question that we don't have an answer for yet, and I'm hoping to get one, of course, is when is PERDA? If we have an election in May, then we will be unable to have our meeting in April because we'll be in PERDA. And so we're looking, and it might be that we need to have 1 or 2 meetings in February, March, and that they might be single item ones and shorter so that we can tackle the 2 main items. At the moment, as far as our 3 main items, just to remind you, are carbon reduction, universal credit and welfare, and flood risk management. If you might agree with me, I think flood risk management and the universal credit are the 2 top ones, and that we might get through those. As far as carbon reduction is going, I see that the government is about to appoint a minister for not just carbon reduction but the green matters. I've also looked at the what's the notices of motion that were agreed unanimously at our last full council meeting, and I think really that is got its momentum of its own at the moment, and that all we were getting really is interest in where things are going without being able to make any strong recommendations as to further action. I'm encouraged by people like Lancaster City Council who are really taking the bull by the horns on that one, and I attended their Green Summit. We were actually promised a Green Summit by Cabinet Member Michael Green. We haven't been able to do it this year, and as again the crystal ball comes in, and I don't even know if we'll be able to do such a thing in 2021. And if we do have an election, and I don't know whether there's going to be one or not, and more than anyone else does, because it's all dependent on the crisis at the moment, then it will be a new team that went forward anyway. So if you're agreed with me, we would look at doing obviously carrying on with the update for flood management, because it is moving with momentum, as I said, and really I want to make the priority for Gillian to be able to do this this project with the health team, which I think will pick up all our recommendations and give us a firm steer for if there is a new council come May. So any sort of comments on those? Fine. People have said that they're happy with that as a plan. We will actually formalise it and put it round so that we have got it there, and you can come back to me on the email for it. I need to get some dates, obviously, because as I say, we don't want to wander into PERDA, but I think every county council in the country is the same boat at the moment. They're all shouting at the government to go firm on when there's an election or not. Yeah, we'll do the two things as priority. Have 2 short meetings, February, March, if you're happy with that. If we can come up with the dates, and then we've got a nice portfolio to hand over to the next external scrutiny committee that kicks off in May. So can I take it we're all agreed on that?
Yes, Chair. Agreed, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, well, without further ado, there's no items of urgent business. Well, everything seems to be urgent at the moment, but I would also mention that we'll be moving over to Teams, and we might want to hold, as I know Gary does, a quick Teams meeting just to say hello to each other, make sure that we're all kicking off with it if we need to. I don't want to overload people, but it might be we need to have a Teams meeting because we've had enough problems with Skype. So unless there's any other comments, thank you all for attending today. It's a lovely day. Let's get out and do our exercise with 2 people, and look forward to seeing you all in the next meeting.